Test, test, test.
Hi.
Hi there, it's Robert.
Hi there. I cannot even remember my name. Uh,
No,
can you hear me?
I can hear you great. Can you hear me?
Thank Jesus.
Yeah, I don't know if she was involved, but thank her. Praise her.
Wow. 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 Okay. Well, I'm glad we've resolved that pretty quickly.
Yeah, that was great actually for us.
I have been looking forward to us reading this book because this is one that really is strong in my mind from childhood, and I was excited to discuss it with you. But what else do you have to tell me?
I actually wore my Angela Lansbury Jessica Fletcher t-shirt to Silicon Valley Pride on Sunday, and there was this woman. There were lots of women with the free mom hugs, and she was like marching, and I was like, "Oh, we'll have a hug," and like we hug, and then she looks at my shirt and she goes, "Jessica," and I go, "Jessica Fletcher from Murder Shirt. I love her," and she just looks at me. She goes, "Apparently."
Apparently. That's the new apparently kid.
Nooch. Oh, I remember the Apparently Kid.
According
Um,
to the sponsored links on people.com, he's all grown up and has a new video, and I have been avoiding clicking on it, and I'm very proud of myself.
I'm proud of you, but I need you to know that you're not going to be able to avoid it forever. At some point, you're going to click, and I want you to give yourself grace.
Do you know I look up that video probably once a year? I
Huh.
remember apparently video and I look it up and I watch it. I laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh.
I love
I
that.
love it so much.
What did you think about the ride? It was great. And apparently, I've never been on live television before. Apparently, sometimes I don't watch the news because I'm a kid, and apparently, every time Grandpa just gives me a remote after we watch the Powerball. What did you think about the ride? Well, it was great because apparently you're spinning around, and apparently, every time you get dizzy. And I've never ever been on live television. I never ever be on live television. Are you excited? Yeah, and apparently I already went down the super slide. When I went down the one, I was scared half to death.
Look right into your podcast app. You'll see there's a discourse happening. Is this book a masterpiece or problematic? One's a lifelong diehard fan, the other's a first-time reader. Both are really smart and funny and attractive. Sweet feather, sweet feather, talking trends and hierarchy. Sweet feather, sweet feather, relentless focus on their bodies. Sweet feather, sweet feather, what do they mean by all American? Sweet feather, sweet feather, no sex, just titillation.
Okay.
Okay, if we don't talk about this book, I'm going to explode.
All right. What'd you think? Do you have 6 words?
Ah.
We texted each other. I'm saying I'm so excited to talk about this book, and you were saying like, yeah, me too, but gotta save it for the pod. But like, oh my gee, I want to be saying stuff. Like, what were you feeling in those
I
moments?
love this book. I love this book.
Yay.
I love this book. I find it interesting. I find it has a like an okay level of stress for someone who doesn't love the stress of it all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
The
it
Trans Am
it has some Trans
count.
Am
It's
drama,
manageable.
but it's manageable. It has a resolution that I feel like all the books have, but I felt okay about it and happy, and I felt like a little more earned than a lot of the other
Mm-hmm.
resolutions.
Me too.
I love the characters. I love the experience of reading it. I found it really enjoyable, and it was kind of a balm to soothe my otherwise weary soul last
Oh
night when I
wow.
started and finished. It was like a one and done, let's get through this. This is one I will return to. This is to me, it's not too good to be true or too good to true the sequel. Um, but it is one that I think I will return to time and time again with new hope and optimism. I love it.
Not me literally crying because
Duh.
I'm so happy to hear that because like I also feel so connected to this book, and like my memory of it is just sitting in Davina's room on her bed reading it and being like, wow. First of all,
Hmm.
it tackles a very serious topic, and maybe we should actually say up front a bit of a
Oh,
content
yeah.
flag, which is domestic violence, basically.
Yeah.
It's one of these ones that does tackle like a pretty serious like family issue, not just Ned as a bitch, which is serious.
Yeah,
But
very. She was seriously a bitch.
and I think seeing how the twins navigate that and seeing how their cousin Kelly navigates it, seeing how their parents handle it, and just like it felt serious in a good way. I don't know how it felt in a way like the book was signaling to me like as a kid, I'm just this feeling of like something's really going on here. We're taking it serious with this one, but in a way that felt good. I don't know. Certain pieces of it stuck out in my memory so potently. Like the costume of them three as these monkeys, the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, wise monkeys, whatever. It like, I don't know, gave me like goosebumps decades later to remember that. I think I just also found it so realistic and so relatable. Some of her relationship with the Kirk the jerk and the way she is with him and the psychology of that. I think it's so well written. I think it's so rich. I just love this book. Like there is a feeling of something bad happening or whatever, but maybe at the end it's like catharsis or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But something about it, yeah, like why does it feel like a bomb? I don't know, but it's like it just does. Like you know she's gonna be okay and the Wakefields are gonna make sure she's okay and like they do and like she is and like her mom's got her and like you kind of know that her mom's got her from the beginning and like oh, I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like for me a very safe and stable way to play, practice, and experience really heavy, hard things. I think
Hmm.
you really nailed it when you said, like, you know from the beginning that her mom has her. Like, and we'll get
Hmm.
into it in a little bit, listeners, of course. But like the central tension of the text is around this kind of family secret and family drama. And it is simultaneously very serious and high stakes. And I felt like the whole time I knew it was going to be okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have so many notes and a million extra textual things, like a million.
Okay. I think we need to
Okay,
jump then.
6 words.
Secrets, lies, betrayal, dash, love is stronger.
Ooh, that's real interesting. And if I may just respond, this
Please.
is rustling something in me because when you say secrets, lies, betrayal, dash, love is stronger, it puts secrets in the category of lies and betrayal, which
Mm-hmm.
to me are these like objectively negative acts. Whereas a secret, I could see as a secret sometimes, and sometimes a family secret could be a way of doing love,
Mm.
not in contrast to love. And that's, I think, one of the questions we can ask is by keeping this quote unquote secret, and we'll get into it, was Kelly's mom hurting her, helping her? Was an act of care, an act of what? And it's so complex.
It's so complex. And thank you for understanding kind of the ways I'm trying to raise these central questions through my very
Of
brief 6 word
course.
reviews. You're kind of so attuned to each word, each comma, each dash. It's really helpful to me.
I'm like your 6 word review doula.
Oh my God, we've all been thinking that. Do you have 6 words for me?
All right. Instead of a 6 word review, because I don't have one,
Mhm.
I'm going to do a quote from a book from famous anthropologist Marilyn Strathern.
Of course, love Mary.
And
That's
this
what I
is
call her.
1999 Property, Substance, and Effect Anthropological Essays on Persons and Things. And she
Mm.
says, we will not understand people's reluctance or their desire to not know or anxieties about where information will lead unless we realize that kinship knowledge has certain built-in effects. This is her talking about specifically like reproductive family secrets that contain information that changes like a kin relationship,
Oh.
biologically speaking. But I think it can be true for other types of family secrets. This idea that keeping a secret and how you relate to a secret and whether you seek to know or not know or share or not share aren't just a case of people trading or not trading information. That's a case of constituting kin relationships. And like the way
Mm.
that family secrets are information managed among different parties is a way of constituting those relationships and identities within each other, as well as projecting against a sort of ideal of what the family relation should be to outsiders, you know?
I do know. Could you say that again, kind of stupider?
Well, I can't say it again because I don't know what I said.
Okay.
But basically, like, if we think of secrets as like an action or behavior, right? Like, if we think of it as like doing secrets, like the practice of secret keeping or secret managing, right? That's not just reflecting an existing sort of family structure, and say the family structure has some hole in it that's a source of shame or whatever, and like that's the pre-existing sort of family unit, and then we're either telling or not telling the truth about it or whatever, right? No, in the course of the telling or not telling is moving around those shapes and those family units. It produces the relations it purports to describe.
Okay. I think that's really helpful.
That's what I was trying to say.
It produces the relationships it purports to describe. It produces the relationships it purports to describe. 8 words.
Okay, well, that's my 6-word review. Cliffhanger.
Sure. So there's like a lot of the Ned and Alice talking about this in an annoying way. So basically, Cousin Kelly is coming to stay. Girls, Mrs. Wakefield said, shaking her head, she's going to be staying a little longer than you may think. I have a feeling that Steve's room will be best, as he'll be back at school when she arrives. Is she coming for a long time? Where's Aunt Laura going to be? That's the other big news. Aunt Laura is getting married. She's met a wonderful man, a widowed doctor who has 2 sons. But Kelly's doing it very well. She idolizes her father. She can't stand the thought of anyone trying to replace him. Your aunt is hoping that if Kelly spends some time with us, she'll cool off a little and be more accepting of her new stepfather. Elizabeth was intrigued. Kelly had always fascinated her, and here would be a chance to get to know her pretty cousin better. Elizabeth only knew the barest facts about her aunt's divorce from Uncle Greg. She knew that her uncle had left when Kelly was very little, only 8 or 9 years old, but it was true that Kelly adored her father, and Aunt Laura never stopped her when she insisted that he was the world's greatest dad. It would be wonderful to see Kelly again, but Elizabeth sensed it might not be so wonderful for Kelly. Not with her mother planning to get remarried and a new father trying to step in between her and her real dad. Plus, she would suddenly have to live with her 2 stepbrothers. She and Jessica would just have to do everything in their power to make their cousin feel welcome. Elizabeth could hardly wait to see her. She just hoped that she and Jessica would be able to help Kelly through the rocky time ahead. Will Kelly's stay in Sweet Valley help her accept the situation at home? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 45, Family Secrets.
Hearing it again is even more deranged than last time of the way the Wakefields presented, because it's literally like, guys, Kelly's coming. They're like, yay. And they're like, but she's actually going to be here for a long time because she has to get used to her new stepfather. Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. Laura's engaged. Like, what? Like, that is like, that should not have been.
No. It's so bizarre. And then the entire thing about she's coming to Sweet Valley so that she can get used to her mom marrying a new guy somewhere else. The pretense, shall we say, very thin, very strange. And the cliffhanger is so ideological in Elizabeth's voice where they're like stepping between her and her real dad and this new man. It's like, huh. She's really taken a stance, that Elizabeth.
It's very strange. Very strange. I guess we should summarize the plot. I mean, I feel like there's only really one plot. I guess we could say the B plot is the costume party.
Oy vey. What
were you thinking?
Not.
What were you
I was
thinking?
thinking there was no B plot.
All right, so let's just do the one plot. Do you want to try to go back and forth with sentences and try to limit it to a certain amount? What should we try to limit it to? 4? Wow. Okay, yeah. Ooh, good. Okay, you start. Your face.
Cousin Kelly is in town staying with the Wakefields, and she looks exactly like that. I want to start over. I'm so nervous.
And she looks exactly like
I mean, the whole first third of the book is just like they look the same.
And you're like, is that gonna matter? You're like, oh, it's some big thing about them looking like triplets, and like they get some magazine gig that's only for triplets, and then they have to print. It's like, nope.
Nope. This was the first book where I realized I was like, gosh, it would be so much easier if I knew what happened at the end, because then I would know at the beginning what to pay attention to and what's nothing. And then I was like, oh, that's why Pardo always has all this good stuff, because she's read it, so she knows what to pay attention to and what's nothing. And the whole point of this is that I haven't read it, so I don't know what to pay attention to. So I'm like trying to give myself a little more grace, because I've been trying to hold myself to the standard of what you bring, and I can't bring it because I'm reading it for the first time. So I spent like most of my notes are like, they look the same. Triplets in history. What's going on with triplets? And then it's like, oh no, that's nothing.
You spent 4 hours doing secondary research on cousins who look like triplets and two of them are twins.
And it turns out it's nothing.
No, absolutely. I mean, I look at this book, I say, repressed memory. I look at this, spoiler alert, I look at this book, I say, dissociative, traumatic, I mean,
Amnesia. Yeah.
we'll get to it. Okay, so should we summarize it?
Sorry, to start over.
So this girl, Kelly, cousin Kelly shows up to supposedly, this is her staying there for like a couple of months, is supposed to help her somehow, like, quote unquote, cool off, help her accept her new stepfather.
And
Period.
while she's in Sweet Valley, the girls try to set her up with Nicholas Morrow, but she is more interested in Kirk the jerk, who he says has turned over a new leaf.
And Kirk, we are remembering, is basically like a Bruce Patman, but worse, just arrogant, obnoxious piece of shit guy. And as she like is dating him, and they're thinking, Also, they are alerted to the fact that like something's going on with her, because she is having nightmares basically every night and waking up screaming. And they're like, oh gosh.
And Kelly's biological father comes to visit for her birthday, and he shows himself to be like insensitive and a complete flake. He shows up late and only stays for a couple of minutes and doesn't have a gift and has terrible excuses and seems to very clearly not be living up to the idolized picture that Kelly has shared with the twins, but Kelly cannot see that disparity.
Yeah, and it's very, very extreme. Like she thinks
We're doing one sentence each. Do you want that to be your sentence?
Yeah, I'm saying I'm saying a sentence. Like, I just think it should be said. Like she thinks, because we didn't actually say it yet, that she thinks he's perfect and describes him as perfect, and thinks like her mom is terrible, and the fact that her mom like took her to Tucson is like, oh, she made it so I can never have a relationship with my dad, and like is very resentful of this. And simultaneously not really remembering anything that happened until she was 8 years old.
So we are at 4 sentences, which was the limit that we set for ourselves, and we have not yet told the story of the book.
Then she's out with Kirk the jerk. He smashes a bottle, and this is a trigger that sends her into a panic and also makes her suddenly recover this repressed memory that she had been accessing in her nightmares, which she is now realizing is actually something that happened to her when she was around 8 years old, right before her mom left, which was being like in a cupboard or under a bed or something while her dad violently smashed every single thing in the house. And she realizes, oh, that's why my mom took me. And actually, maybe he's actually not such a perfect dad.
And maybe mom isn't the worst. And then mom comes in and they have a beautiful reconciliation and she moves back to Tucson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's the book.
Tagline.
Is there more to Kelly's perfect family than meets the eye?
No.
Yeah, that was terrible. Do family secrets perpetuate relationships and create dynamics rather than just be, I got nothing. What are the
What's the secret that's hurting Kelly Bates?
Oh, it's nothing. Okay, fine.
Oh, I think it's everything. Okay, what I would think it would say is, can Kelly handle the truth? Or like, are Kelly's happy memories concealing something? Or is her father too good to be true, or something like this? indicating that what lies below the veneer is the dark thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But by using the word the secret that's hurting her, it's like strange
Mm-hmm.
phrasing because it raises the question, like, does secret mean the fact of the thing that the secret describes, i.e., her dad's violence? Is that the thing that's hurting her, or is the fact of it having been kept secret from her? Right?
Hmm.
It creates the ambiguity that holds that meaning too, because otherwise it should say like, what's the thing she can't remember? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And I think also the word hurting, it's like it makes it sound like it sort of reminds me of when what's her name, Sandy Bacon told Manuel like the craziest thing happened to me today. I found out something terrible, and it's like
Yeah.
her suddenly not being in denial and being able to face her parents' racism. It's like this saying like it's a secret that's hurting her. It's like it also conjures that like he was hurting them and he was hurting her, like he was
Hmm.
violent, I don't know. So I like it for that ambiguity,
Can you read
you
the
know?
language again one more time?
What's the secret that's hurting Kelly Bates? Doesn't that sound strange? You would think,
I see what,
like,
yeah. Because the secret is that her dad is abusive, but there's some slippage there around what's doing the hurting, I guess,
you would think it
is
would be like
interesting.
Susan Stewart, like, can she handle the truth? Or what's the painful truth? You know what I mean? But it doesn't say that
Hmm.
she's being hurt by the painful truth. It says she's being hurt by the secret.
Is in some ways is that saying like the fact that Kelly's mom, Aunt Laura famously, keeps it a secret, that is hurting her because she has this idealized picture of her father that her father can never live up to, and all of the damage and pain that's coming from that is because she doesn't know the truth. And so
Yeah.
it's the act of keeping it a secret, not what the secret is. Is that where we're going?
Yeah, like I think this phrasing encompasses both of those possible meanings. And I think we should ask in the book, like, is the book's perspective critical of Laura that she did the wrong thing? And like, I don't know, like I think there's some questions in there, and the different characters have their own opinions on it. And Alice is like at the end, like this young girl deserves to know the truth. And she's like sort of more worried about that than about the fact that like Laura was abused. Anyway, but
Well, yeah. No one cares that Laura's abused. Let's be clear
no.
about that.
It's more like, why don't you tell me?
Yeah.
Um, okay, cover.
Well, back tagline?
Oh, sorry.
Trapped in a nightmare. Dot dot dot.
Gorgeous. No. Much more like just taken from the book.
A family secret. Dot dot dot.
See no evil.
Oh, I mean, yes, taken from the book, but also
Mhm.
there's richness there.
Yeah, it's just they explicitly acknowledge that richness in the book, where Elizabeth is like, what an ironic metaphor. Again, not knowing what
Yeah,
irony is. This is now the
there were
third
a
time I
couple.
think Liz has not known what irony is.
Yeah, I mean, we can't keep account on that. We can't keep a watch on that. There were several moments where I was like jotting down smart things to say, and then the next paragraph was like the smart thing I jotted down. I was like, oh, okay, cool, cool, cool,
Oh,
cool. I
really?
guess I
Like
don't have analysis.
them saying smart things?
Well, them doing like the analysis
Yeah.
that I wanted to do. Like, there's a whole thing about is Kelly unknowingly repeating the relationship pattern she saw in her mother by dating Kirk. And I was like, ooh, I wonder if that's what's happening. And then the book immediately is like, maybe Kelly's repeating the relationship pattern she's seen with her mom. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess what I was saying was not original or insightful. It's just in the text.
I had the exact same moment of like that felt like, oh wow, they're really having Liz like spell this out kind of. I do think it's just one more thing on the title, like having it
Please.
plural. It is in line with the sort of typical format of the book titles to have it plural, but I also think it brings
Yes.
up the question of like, again, sort of showing that family secrets aren't as, it's not as discreet or straightforward as you might think, because like in this book there are multiple fractal different secrets that different people have access to at different levels. So for example, Elizabeth is vaguely aware that Kelly's father cheated on her mom multiple times, right? We don't know if Kelly's aware of that. I don't think Kelly is necessarily aware of that. It's not really indicated that
Yeah,
she is.
I agree.
And so then Elizabeth, the cousin, knows something that she doesn't know. And then Elizabeth also has this intuition that there's something even worse because her mom has implied that there was maybe an incident that sort of triggered the Auntie Laura to take her away and move to Tucson. So by virtue of illusion, by virtue of intimation, they're kind of signaling secrets within the secrets. And so it is a multiple set of nested secrets and who has access to what. It's not just one secret. So I think that's raised there too.
I love that.
Okay, cover.
Please. Yeah, that's nothing. 3 cute blonde girls. They're not triplets, but boy, do they look like it.
I don't think it's nothing.
Okay.
For me, what's just notable about this is I don't think we typically see multiple people with a gaze straight ahead.
No, never.
Let's call it to camera, right?
Yeah.
Like usually sometimes one of them's looking ahead, one of them's looking at the other one. Usually they're engaged in some sort of physical relation to each other that indicates something about the relationship or a story, or one of them's clinging or one of them's worried. In this one, they're all 3 looking at us, smiling with their arms around each other, posing. They're doing happy family portrait. And I think part of what this could show is part of what this could ask is in what ways, first it's raising the fact of like what they present to the outside world versus what's really going on, right? Because the book is called Family Secrets and it's a picture of them all smiling to camera, is raising that dissonance. But secondly, it could be asking, in what way does Elizabeth and Jessica collude or participate in this secret? And are they participating in this potential harm, right? When they stay silent. There's the night where they have the fight with her and they're telling her, like, how can you accuse your mom? Like, it looks like your dad's being kind of shitty. Then the next morning, they're all smiles and they act like it didn't happen. And they're putting on their monkey costumes. And she's kind of relieved about that, Because Alice has told them, don't say anything.
That is rich. I'm willing to hear that. The other thing, it feels like we don't often see both lavaliers on the cover.
Oh.
And just like seeing 2 lavaliers to me really highlights Kelly's lack of a lavalier. And of course, the lavalier is kind of the symbol of a happy family and the symbol of an intact family given from parents to child since time immemorial. We all have the lavaliers that our parents gave us. And so it's just like, it's creating an insider, outsider, happy family, unhappy family, healthy, unhealthy kind of line in the sand. Is that
especially because like gifts from parents is very much a thing in this book. Like Kelly receives like nothing from her dad, and then she gets this big bouquet, thinks it's from her dad, loves it, realizes it's from her mom, hates it. I do think it's interesting how they made her look like in some ways almost identical to them, but then there are some clear differences. I think they did a good job of that. Like she's a little bit taller, her nose
face
is a
thinner, of course,
more bulbous. But it's like it looks exactly like how the book describes it. So I like that.
I agree.
All right.
Exquisite is what people are saying mostly.
Shall we?
Liz, wake up! And I highlighted that and only that and thought, well, there's an engine right there, my sweetheart.
Certainly.
But so, Liz, wake up! Elizabeth Wakefield rolled over and grumbled sleepily. She was still lingering over an especially good dream. Pause for effect. She and her boyfriend, Jeffrey French, were walking hand in hand along the beach, the foamy surf washing up over their ankles as the sun dropped in a golden glow into the rolling blue Pacific. So it is a wet dream, we'd call it. A foamy wet dream. Without warning, her pillow was yanked out from under her and thumped on her head. Jessica, she cried, pulling herself up and grabbing the pillow with one hand. Are you trying to give me a concussion? As Elizabeth opened her eyes and scrambled to a seated position in her bed, her twin sister crossed to the window and snapped up the shade. A blaze of sunshine poured into the cozy room. Nope. I was sick of hearing you snore, that's all. It looks like it's going to be a nice... Jessica, I just remembered. Pause for emphasis. That's right, big sister. Today's the day. Kelly's coming. So we start with this call. Awaken yourself from the dream you are in. Acknowledge what is really going on around you. See what is happening. And is this book not a call to see the reality around us. We get sunshine pouring into the window, illuminating. We've, of course, got that wet dream, which I don't want to spend too much time with, but I mean, come on. We've got this idea that, I mean, I wouldn't call it a repressed memory, but we've got this idea of a sudden realization and dawning of something that one has kind of forgotten. So there's just like a lot of the central themes, excitements, and happenings happening.
Wonderful. If I may build.
Please, I insist.
In Elizabeth's situation, and in what we typically think of dreams, is you awake from the fantasy to the reality. In Kelly's situation, her day-to-day life is the fantasy. Her day-to-day life is when she is repressing the truth. Only in her dreams, which are nightmares, which she's telling herself is just a fantasy for the bulk of the book, is when she actually is experiencing her memories, which is the reality of what happened. And she awakens to be in a different sort of dream state, doesn't she? Where she's kind of deluding herself. It draws our attention to a blurring of boundaries of, it's not that simple that dreams are fantasy and being awake is reality, because a lot of times when we are awake, we're living in a fantasy state. And the way that we know what's true and the way that we remember what's true isn't that simple. No, in fact, we're divided. And in this book, we see a lot of Kelly's body knowing things and trying to communicate to her, in her sleep, some part of her subconscious or whatever is having access to this, and yet in waking life does not. And so I think it's also sort of showing the fuzziness between how we're typically thinking of dreams and awake, and how the psychology is like more complicated than that.
It's like I had a dream that I was a butterfly and I awoke to find I was a man, or was I dreaming I was a man and awoke to find myself a butterfly?
Well,
there's a lot of role reversal happening in the first chapter between Elizabeth and Jessica. All of my initial like, oh my gosh, they've like totally swapped, and Jessica's being responsible and waking up Elizabeth, and Jessica knows what day it is, and Jessica knows what time it is. And it didn't really go anywhere.
yeah, I think there's a big theme in this book of disguise and mix and concealed identities or revealing of identities, right? And there's like, they're all, the first day of school, they all dress up, the three of them, the same so they can confuse everyone. And then Liz tells her, oh, you're gonna have to go to school in a disguise. And they dress up as the monkeys. And she at some point is seeing a fake identity on Kirk, and then is seeing his true identity. And her father, his true identity is revealed. And Kelly, her own identity may be put into question as she acknowledges her own memories. So I think it's all around that.
I'm interested in that. There is also this like kind of, they think about whether Kelly is going to look like them. And there, to me, I read a little bit of like tension or anxiety around that. I mean, Jessica literally says, I hope she doesn't look like us. Two of us is too much for most people anyways. And she's like kind of joking, but it does feel like there's like we're twins. What does a third one of us do to our dynamic, to our experiences, to our family, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, although I did notice, maybe part of the reason we both felt sort of safe reading this book is because it did really feel like both Jess and Liz were really on Kelly's side the whole time, and like were really in her corner and really compassionate and thoughtful about her. That we don't necessarily see them always be to everyone.
Yeah.
Like everything from them taking time to like arrange plates and cheese in a special way on her birthday, and like Jess really taking seriously these nightmares, and them trying to think about how to support her, and how do they deal with the fact that they know about the dad is kind of a dick or whatever. And like, I enjoyed seeing that. I feel like they both really do care about her.
It's the best version of when they're on the same team working together. So it's
Yes.
like when they were doing the stuff to try to convince their parents to stay, and that was like zany and fun, and they're working together. It's like that, but it's like, it feels more real and more human and more important. And I personally loved it.
I was like, what? On my page 4, when they're like, go down to breakfast, and Alice's eyes are sparkling, and she's like, everything all set for Kelly. The twins knew their mother was thrilled at having her niece for an extended visit. That's really, really strange. That's really, really strange. Why would she be thrilled at this? Kelly's showing up because She's basically estranged from her mother. Things are so tense in her home, they literally can't be in the same space. So she's coming as like a last ditch effort for that family to survive, which God knows the logic of that. But like Alice is thrilled. So weird. Or are they being sarcastic?
No, they're definitely not being sarcastic.
What are you laughing
That
at?
is, I'm laughing just because it's like such a, it was, for me, it was such a throwaway, like,
Right?
oh, it's nice that Alice is happy. And you have done so much work excavating how inappropriate it is for Alice to be happy. And how happiness is actually terrible and we shouldn't be happy. And I agree with you. And it's also just like Alice is not a mother to her own children, but she's so excited to get another kid in the house. What's that about?
Here we get, I think, some insight into how they've been talking about and what they know about the uncle, right? Like, Jessica's like, I never did understand why she left Sweet Valley like that. Mrs. Wakefield's mouth tightened. Your Aunt Laura had every reason to leave Greg. Across the table, Elizabeth and Jessica exchanged a meaningful look. And this is how silence perpetuates secrets, right? They had heard enough about their uncle to know he wasn't exactly the ideal husband. He had always been handsome and notoriously charming, but he had also cheated on his wife and then swore never to do it again and again. He had a terrible temper and always apologized extravagantly for losing it, signaling cycles of abuse. Their aunt had put up with a lot, but finally one night she had packed up Kelly, left for Tucson, filed for divorce. No one ever talked about the incident, but Elizabeth suspected something terrible must have happened. And just, it must be said, it seems too obvious to say, but the fact that it cannot be discussed means there is a stigma on domestic violence, means there is some sort of, this is shameful for some reason. It's so sad. I feel so much for Laura. Literally, what support did she have? She couldn't go to Alice. Alice didn't even know what happened. So who did know? Who did she go to in Tucson? Like, she probably was totally alone in the world. She just didn't tell anyone. So sad. Anyhow.
It's really sad. It's also, I think we're getting into kind of like secrets doing more than just being withholding or sharing information, but like creating relationships and like this idea
being performatives, we could say.
Yeah, I mean, and of course we don't mean that in any kind of dismissive way because performativity doesn't mean that it's not real. Of course.
We mean that it creates social facts.
Of course. And I think this idea that they all know about the incident, but they don't know about it's like, that actually is weirder to me than telling or not telling. This kind of in-between gray zone where it's like they know an incident happened. They don't know what it is.
But this is literally so common. This is so common.
Yeah.
And some of these articles I was looking at, that like the process by which that happens can be really gradual, where it's like people just learn not to ask. Progressively, from the way it's discussed, it's signaled to not ask, so that then it continues to be just shrouded and shrouded and shrouded because it never gets clarified, and that gets reinforced.
I mean, this gets back, I guess, to the secret hurting Kelly from the tagline. Like, it's keeping the secret is ostensibly to protect Kelly from being hurt. This whole thing is meant to keep Kelly from experiencing pain and from realizing who her father really is and from all of that kind of trauma. And it inadvertently produces all sorts of pain and trauma rather than removing it.
I mean, I was trying to find out in 2024, what is the clinical psych advice for childhood trauma that a parent knows has happened? Should they tell the child later? Should they, like, what is the guidance or current thinking on that? But I couldn't find anything, because every time you try to look up research on that stuff, it's like, because of all this controversy about repressed memory, for the listeners, if we have any young listeners, like, to give some historical context, this is a really, really controversial topic. The whole idea of quote unquote repressed memory. In the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of very sensationalized cases of this, and then there was a big backlash against it, and it was sort of, by a lot of psychologists and stuff, dismissed as not evidence-based. But like, to my knowledge, repressing memories from trauma or like not having memories or having amnesia from them or whatever you want to call it, and then maybe getting access to them later. Like I think that is a real thing. And I'm like, well, where's the like what's that called? And what's the research on this? And maybe you know, but when I looked it up, it was called dissociative amnesia. But when I looked up
Yeah.
dissociative amnesia, it's saying that like, yeah, there's evidence of it with like people with PTSD and veterans, but it's like it's so highly contested that like I really couldn't find very much stuff to read about it to answer some of these questions because it's so closely linked. And I was really surprised to hear that because I thought that that backlash sort of calmed down, and I thought the sort of general wisdom was like, no, this is real. Like, yeah, maybe some sketchy stuff happened at some daycares in the 80s, and like all this like sensationalism about satanic cults and everything. Like there was some inflation of this concept, but like I'm pretty sure that is real. Speak.
I mean, I don't know. I'm speaking as a.
Aren't you an adolescent developer?
I'm speaking not as an adolescent developer who does not really know anything about this. But like it is real, right? Like this idea that in order to cope, oftentimes we dissociate and then we don't form memories around the traumatic events. Like that feels very real.
I think so too. And if you go to the dissociative amnesia page on Wikipedia, it says that it is real. But I was just surprised that what I was able to find was way less than I would have expected. I don't know. But I'm going to go on record and say I think it's real.
Me too.
I did want to say that not being able to have found any scholarly sort of guidance on this in terms of ethics or what's helpful or not helpful for kids or whatever, I did watch this Netflix documentary called Tell Me Who I Am about two identical twins. And one of them in adulthood I forget what happened. He had some traumatic brain injury or something. He fully lost his memory. He didn't know anything. So his twin brother basically filled him in on his entire life and identity.
That's so weird.
But he left out a couple of things. And so...
Wait, is this real or not real?
It's real. So the identical twin told him, like, we had this life.
Is this going to spoil stuff? What's going to happen?
I think you've already been spoiled. I mean, he left out some stuff. There was family secrets. And I wrote it down because I went to the Netflix site to look it up to see if I remembered it right. And the description of it is, in this documentary, Alex trusts his twin Marcus to tell him about his past after he loses his memory. But Marcus is hiding a dark family secret. And it's interesting because I don't have to tell you what it is, but the documentary deals with the ethics of should he have told him or not. And Marcus's perspective was, I was trying to save him from pain. And the other one said I had a right to know. So
that's
it's exactly
so interesting.
Yeah, so I guess you could watch it. It would be an interesting companion to this.
I think it'd be a perfect companion. I mean, it feels like it ripped this off very much. And I love that.
Also, just to get it in here, because I have to, Stories We Tell, the Sarah Polley documentary. Have you seen it?
I don't think so. I don't watch a lot of things.
Okay, it's about family secrets and memory and stories we tell and how we reconstruct what happened, and it's a masterpiece.
Okay, should that be on my to be watched list?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are we here?
We just finished with what can't be said around Kelly and what's going on. And there's so much kind of hanging.
Oh.
And then we have this awkward thing where no one's talking about the incident with a capital I. Laura says she doesn't believe in telling Kelly any of the bad memories she has because she thinks Kelly should have good feelings about her dad. And then this abrupt shift. For a moment, Mrs. Wakefield stared moodily into her coffee cup. Then she managed a bright smile. Okay, who wants eggs? And she's like, woof.
That's them doing this, right? That's okay, who wants eggs?
That's very who wants eggs. And I do.
I did think... 2 hard-boiled, 1 scrambled. No, 1 hard-boiled, 2 scrambled. I love
3 eggs
this
is a whole lot. And I don't... The hard-boiled and the scrambled, can they be separate? I don't want them to touch each other.
I want 3 eggs any style.
Yeah, which style would you like?
I'm not sure of the style. What are my options?
Scrambled, sunny side up.
What about hard-boiled?
Hard-boiled, sure.
But 3 hard-boiled is
Yeah,
a lot.
absolutely.
That's a lot. 2 hard-boiled.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 1 hard-boiled, and then the other 2 in my order. Can those be scrambled?
Of course, so 2 scrambled eggs, 1 hard-boiled egg.
And can you mix the scrambled part? Don't make it touch the hard-boiled egg part. I want that hard-boiled. I love this place.
I did think it stood out to me that when The way they talk about this, when Mrs. Wakefield says Aunt Laura has made it a policy not to prejudice Kelly against her father. So telling the truth would be prejudice. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like basically what they're saying is he can't be accountable to his own behavior. To just be honest about what he did to his own daughter is to prejudice the daughter in like an unfair way against him. It's like making him a victim, which is so
Hmm.
ideological.
Yeah.
And the word prejudice, I was like, yikes. And then Mrs. Wakefield says, this I think is crucial. She doesn't believe in telling Kelly any of the bad memories she has because she thinks Kelly should have good feelings about him. The she there, okay, when it says the first time I read this, I thought Aunt Laura, it means Aunt Laura doesn't believe in telling Kelly any of the bad memories Aunt Laura has because she thinks Kelly should have good feelings about him. Then I read it again, I say no. She doesn't believe in telling Kelly any of the bad memories Kelly has because they're Kelly's own memories. And I think that ambiguity is important because it's saying Aunt Laura wouldn't be prejudicing her because it's not telling her Aunt Laura's bad memories of him, how he was a bad husband. It's Kelly's own bad memories because he was a bad father. And that's the difference. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the other thing that's weird is like not telling bad memories. Like the framing it as bad memories really called out to me because it's like what she really means is like not telling the
The
truth.
truth.
But it's like
Yes.
framing it as bad memory. Like
Yes.
memories are fallible, memories are inherently perspectival, but like
Biased.
and biased. And framing it that they like she doesn't want to tell her any of the bad memories. I was like, this is such a weird.
Yeah.
Okay, who wants eggs?
All right.
Another way that I think the text really works to make us feel safe and comfortable is that we get Kelly's interiority very, very, very early on. And we can see she's like, she seems like a sweet girl. She seems like a nice girl who's in a bad situation. Like, this is not going to be a too good to true situation or a too good to be true situation. This is not like she doesn't have ulterior motives. She's not secretly evil. She's not scheming to break relationships up. Like, we see very early on, like, she is a sweet girl who is nervous and excited and can't wait to see her cousins, etc.
Totally. We get, I think I wrote early signs of Kelly's jacked nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
When she's on the plane, her eyes fill with tears, thinking about home. And then she's gripping the armrest, bracing herself to where the woman next to her is like, is this your first flight?
She's walking out. Kelly could feel the huge grin on her face as she walked toward the spot where a crowd had gathered. It's this idea that like her face is doing something. And so she's realizing like, oh, I must be happy. Even as it's like, she's hurrying, people are waiting. Like it's this scene of hubbub and we don't get like her being happy. We don't get anything where it seems like she's happy. She says she's excited. Her face is grinning and she can feel it, but it's like she can't internalize because, as you said, her nervous system is so jacked.
It's such good writing. That's so good. She could feel the grin on her face. That's incredible. And it's like, yeah, this whole book, she's fractured. Like her emotions and her body or her thoughts is all disconnected, alienated.
Her first interaction with the twins, I highlighted just because it was a moment of kind of strangeness to me, insofar as she gets the twins wrong. She misidentifies which twin is which. And I thought there was going to be some meat to be made here or something interesting to say. And I don't really have anything to say. I was just like, oh, that's kind of a weird moment.
For me, it was just to show that they haven't seen each other in a while and they're really getting to know each other again now.
But what's strange is it's like a broken palindrome with the uncle. Her dad shows up and is like immediately knows which one is which.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is this just highlighting, is this trying to get us in a place where we're like, oh, Kelly's memory can't be trusted. She can't remember which ones. Like, I'm wondering what work is being done there. She's not seeing also just be clearly.
Yeah, it could be. It could be also her distractedness. It could be with him, the fact that it could be also just setting up the contrast with him to even further emphasize how much he's able to win people over and kind of make people feel like he's attending to them when he's not, you know?
Kind of a
Ben
narcissistic.
Affleck. He's a Ben Affleck, no comment. I mean,
we can't. I mean, J-Lo's no peach is all I'm going to say. Not that she deserves anything bad, but
There's a reference to the fact that when Liz and Kelly were kids, they both loved Alice in Wonderland. I think we must consider the thematic link in terms of dreams and dream
ooh.
states versus reality. And Alice in Wonderland is also a text that deploys this motif in such a powerful way, making us again kind of question, is the dream state the fantasy, or is there actually elements that are so vivid they must be real?
I love that. I also love the way that early on we get pitched this idea that Kelly is the blend of Elizabeth and Jessica. So she's got the Alice Adventures in Wonderland. She writes for the school newspaper. Oh no, sorry.
But
She knows that
she has two
Elizabeth writes.
suitcases.
But she also, it says like, I see
Yeah.
you inherited the same wardrobe jeans Jessica got. So it is like she's a blending of the two of them in a way that's very interesting to me.
I died when like, why does Liz think she has to be the like representative of every administrative task that ever has to be done on the planet? One of the first things she says to Kelly, so excited, is you'll have to officially register at school. But Mr. Cooper, the principal, already knows you'll be staying for a couple of months. He'll probably give you a speech. It's pretty boring, but his intentions are good. I'm like, why is that your first thought?
It's
You're
so
such a
well
nerd.
observed to her character. That is exactly what she is like, though.
You'll have to officially register. Like, that's an insane thing for a 16-year-old to say. Like, why is she thinking about that? Officially register? It's like, why is she thinking about paperwork? It's weird.
That's weird. We're trying to set immediately. Jess is trying to set Kelly up with Nicholas Mora, who's such a hunk.
And she's like, he sounds perfect. Isn't there anything wrong with him? And Liz is like, well, his sister died. She's like, oh.
Yeah, it is that's a very, I don't want to spend too much on that, but it is really weird. Where it's like,
Yeah.
what's the catch? Well, the catch is that this is how her sister died. And then Kelly goes, I don't think I should, as if like once your sister dies, unfortunately, you cannot date any longer.
Well,
The rules.
then they get to Calico Drive and Mrs. Wakefield says to Kelly, welcome home. Chapter 2, the three of them dress alike to go to school.
And we get, even before that, we get the idea that, so because I was really attuned to role reversals, chapter 2 opens with Jessica loaning Kelly a skirt when Jessica's normally the recipient of skirts. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
And then it turns out they all have the same skirt anyways. Isn't that cute?
Miss Dalton, when she sees them, says, mon Dieu.
I love it. There's this idea of like, are we twins? Are we triplets? How do we fit in together? We're all dressing the same. We get to the Fiat. The Fiat is a 2-seater and they have to fit the third one in somehow.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. So we've got the reactions of the triplets being mon Dieu. And of course, muscular sun-bronzed surfer Bill Chase says, awesome.
She meets all the Oracle people, Olivia and Penny, etc. And she's like, maybe I could write an article. And Penny's like, how about you talk about how Sweet Valley's different since when you moved away when you were little and what's changed? And she's like thinking to herself, well, I don't remember anything from when I was little. So let me just try to talk about something else. And then she goes, okay, how about I do like a stranger's view? And Penny goes, okay, but just try some kind of angle though. More than just first impressions, okay? I just love that because it's like funny that Penny's like being a little bit tough with her. You're like, don't just give me some boring little thing, you know?
Well, the other thing that's interesting about the time in the Oracle is that Penny's first suggestion is, how about writing an expose, The Secret Life of Elizabeth and Jessica, the true story?
Right.
I mean, there's this idea again of what is exposed, what is said, what is not said. I love it.
Exactly. In chapter 3, Liz is looking up from her journal of famous keeper of secrets.
But of course her journal is, say it with me, boring.
And her biggest secret
Unbearable.
is, say it with me, her dream of being a writer one day.
Yeah. I normally
Sweet
don't
Valley's
show
worst
people
kept
this.
secret.
Yeah. I actually have some poetry. I never show anyone.
This, I think, is so interesting, this chapter. Jessica like slips quietly into Liz's room, shuts the door behind her. She's like, Liz, I have to tell you something. And Liz is like, sounds pretty serious, lightly. I think it's going to be something goofy, but it actually is something serious. Like, we don't usually see Jessica come into Liz's room with that kind of angle, at least not this early in a book, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought it would be like a surprise at something stupid, but it's like, oh, actually, she's really worried about Kelly. She heard these nightmares.
again, we just see kind of Jessica's evolution in kindness and thoughtfulness. And I was just saying, of course, Liz is like, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to solve this problem by making everything easy on her. And remember, nothing bad about Uncle Greg. It's like, Liz, no, honey, no.
Liz decides that it's probably anxiety about being in a new place. And Jess is like, should we say something? And Liz is like, well, I usually do, but if she doesn't want to talk about it, I don't think we should push it, which is interesting. Like this question of when does privacy become secrecy, or when does privacy become like,
Yeah.
but Jess said she really doesn't want to talk about it, So yeah, should they push it? Should they not? It's tricky.
But it's also like Liz thinks the answer is more silence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dairy Burger, we get to meet Nicholas. Why am I blanking on Nicholas Morrow's last name? Morrow. We get like more just kind of weirdness around Kelly where she's like, oh my God, it must be so great to get to work with your father. You're so lucky.
Like, my dad's the best, and here's a picture of him. Let's all look at it over our milkshakes.
So weird. It's so weird to show a picture of your father to your cousin and have your cousin say, he's really handsome. Too bad he's too old for me, Jessica said disgustingly.
Yeah, that wasn't great. That wasn't great.
Wasn't it? Was it not great?
I did think it was a really nice detail. Kelly's first impression of Nicholas is all these nice things. He was friendly and casual too, and instantly put Kelly at ease. The response you would expect is she would be attracted to that. We would think, based on this, she's going to like him. This is going to make her interested in him, the fact that he puts her at ease. No, that's a turnoff for her. She wants to be put at dis-ease. It's such a great way of showing that because it sets you up to be a little bit surprised. You know what I mean? It tells you the good things about Nicholas, and it's like, yeah, she sees them. She actually feels them. But she's so used to associated the opposite feeling with comfort that she goes after the bad feeling.
Mm-hmm. We've seen it before with like Jess and with Liz, like kind of mixing sex and danger and like
squirming and anxiety.
Yeah. It's very interesting. We, of course, get Pascal's Kelly's birthday, where Kelly says, my dad's the best. He'll be back in town at the end of next week. He's coming back from Europe just to be with me on my birthday. Isn't that incredible? I can't wait to see him. And readers everywhere highlighted this and we're like, yeah, obviously something's going to happen there.
Then we get the introduction to the party of the week. The party of the week strains credulity here because it's a costume party at the country club, okay? Here's why it strains credulity. Not yet. At the moment, Nicholas is like, hey, Kelly, do you want to be my date to this costume party? And Jess and Liz, they're also, we learn, coming as his guests. That's fine. But then when we get to the actual costume party, every single person from high school's there. Winston's there, Ken's there, the droids are performing. You're telling me every single kid in their class got a ticket to this country club event? And the droids is who they picked? No, not the Sweet Valley Country Club that I know. No, they're just letting in anyone. Okay. Oh, one more thing. Sorry. We learned that actually, I said Nicholas was bringing Liz and Jess as his guests. No, it's that Lila is bringing Liz and Jess as her guests. And a reason I thought that strains credulity, I wrote down, since when do you not need a date? They're always obsessing over having a date, especially for fancy events like the Bridgewater Ball and country club dances. So why would Lila just be cool with like bringing Jess and Liz along? And also, why would Liz supposedly want to go to such an exclusive, snooty event?
And Jess would go without a man on her arm? I find that very hard to believe.
And like, why would Lila bring Liz? It's just weird. All right.
Kelly does announce her decision that she has decided to stay. When my dad comes back, I'm going to tell him I want to live with him instead of mom, and maybe he'll be willing to move back to Sweet Valley. So this is her big plan.
Chapter 4, I assume you have a lot to say about the tennis writing.
It's good. It's good tennis writing. So we've got a showdown between Jessica and Kelly, and it seems that Jessica has met her match. Kelly is very good at tennis. And she
maybe even hustled her a little bit.
Oh, definitely. And she plays with an arch smile on her face.
An arch smile? I don't like that. How do you interpret that?
It's like she's being kind of like
knowingly wry, as you like
yes,
to say.
I think she's definitely being knowingly wry. Do I like to say that?
You said it once. I'm
I do like
psychotic.
it. So we
And
get
then
some
we get
tennis
Kirk the
face-off.
jerk. Kirk the jerk shows up.
And we've met him before. He's a bad boy. He's super hot, it must be stated. It cannot be overstated how hot he is.
But the
Um,
reality of Kirk, and again, we have the reality versus the fantasy, could be summed up by Jessica's nickname for him, Kirk the jerk, which I did think I made up, and then I realized Jessica calls him that.
I think maybe it's a hand and fork situation or a glove and spork situation where you kind of came together around it.
One thing I like about this in comparison to other storylines where the person has to like figure out that the person they're interested in is a jerk and like it takes them some time because the other person puts on such a pretense or whatever. In this one, it's made so clear that like Kirk is so obviously a jerk, you would know it in 5 seconds. And that's emphasized like so many times. So it's like it had taken Jessica and a number of other girls at Sweet Valley a few short days to figure it out. And then when Kelly tells them she's going to go out with him or whatever, they like at first don't even sweat it because they're like, oh, well, obviously she'll realize instantly he's an asshole. We don't even need to say anything because it's so obvious. Then she comes home and still likes him. And we're like, huh? So I think also reinforcing that it's not that Kelly doesn't get it. It's not that Kelly doesn't see it. She sees him for exactly who he is. And she, because of this experience with her dad, is associating that type of personality and that type of dynamic as love, and she is pursuing it. She knows what's going on, but she has to create all this denial around it because she's like addicted to it, kind of.
That's so interesting because as I was reading, I was like, wait, has Kirk like turned over a new leaf? Like maybe everyone's still prejudicing him and maybe he actually is different. And obviously it turns out, listeners, he is not. But
for like that 30 seconds, there was like 30 seconds where they're like sitting and he seems like he might be nice, right? I don't think it lasted very long.
No, but I still thought there was a chance that maybe
Yeah.
one of the things that happens is that Kirk the jerk turns into Kirk the smirk and then becomes Kirk the okay guy.
That would be nice.
Spoiler alert, doesn't happen in this book.
It is telling that the way that they first go out is that he shows up to tennis and is like, do you want to come to the Dairy Burger? And she's like, yeah, sure. And then cuts the game short with Jess, where it's like, in a very, very small way, doing this thing that is a red flag of like sacrificing your friendships or like sacrificing existing commitments or whatever to accommodate someone who is just doing these like last minute or is not being considerate to you. And we've seen that dynamic, for example, with Elizabeth and Amy, or with Johanna and Peter, or with any number of, you know.
Yeah, the one thing that I thought was interesting was with growing horror, Jessica realized that Kelly was attracted to Kirk. And there's this like interesting slippage stuff happening here because Jessica was also attracted to Kirk when we first met him. Jessica also like so it's I'm wondering.
But she realized instantly. And like she thinks that he's so obviously like I think that's what the horror is, like, right? Like it didn't take long with Kirk.
It did, I mean, it's not like they dated or anything, but I do think I think there's some interesting thing happening there with the overlap between.
Oh, you think she's jealous?
No, not at all. I think it's she's seeing behavior that she herself also has had.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
I
she
don't
thinks
think she's
herself,
jealous, but-
she'll find out soon enough what a total conceited pig he is, and I won't have to even say a word. And then Liz is like, well, don't worry about it. As soon as she walks through the door, it'll be all over because she'll be like, wow, that was silly of me. He's obviously a piece of shit. And Jess is like, yeah, how long can a sane person stand him? Okay. And then Kelly comes home and it's like, he's really nice.
She says he's changed. He's tried to change lately. And at that point, I was like, maybe he actually has.
So, and she tells them he's really sorry about the way he treated people when he first came to Sweet Valley. He says it was because he was so shy and afraid of being rejected. And I wrote, she likes to be able to tell a story about bad behavior belying deep sensitivity and fear, because then that can be true for her dad.
Mm-hmm. And I think that could be true in these books too. I think there's an alternate version of these books where he did act that way because he was like,
Yeah, that's just not this character.
Right, I know. I'm just saying they write it off, like it feels like they write him off as if that would never happen. But it's like I could see a book in which that absolutely does happen.
But I wouldn't enjoy reading that book because I think culturally we're so inundated with that perspective to a
Yeah.
point where it's actually dangerous. So many stories from Beauty and the Beast to like everything where it's like a man that mistreats women. It's only because he's actually even more sensitive and just like afraid. And that's like such a common trope that is like actually so fucking harmful and so ubiquitous that I don't want to read that. I'm not interested in that ever. That being said, I understand the epidemic of male loneliness and I am sensitive to boys' problems, but not when they're being mean to women.
I think that's fair. We're brainstorming ideas. And then Kelly says that she wants to go to the party with Kirk instead of with Nicholas. And Jessica goes, "You're kidding." And Elizabeth sat up straight. "Kelly, you can't break a date with someone just because you want to go with someone else. It's not right." And I think the book is asking me to agree with them, and I don't agree with them. She barely, as she points out, she barely knows Nicholas. It wasn't a real date because he doesn't know her. Whereas she like went on an actual date with Kirk.
Yeah, I guess I don't really care either way, but I do think as it continues and she's like, okay, I'll tell Nicholas I'm not going to go with him. And then she like continues to not tell Nicholas, makes it ruder. You know what I mean?
Oh, I agree with
So
that.
it's
Yeah.
like gradations before it
yeah,
becomes
okay.
pretty inconsiderate. Oh, I died. And I wonder if this made you think of what I thought of, and if it did, we're really twins and best friends forever.
And
And
if
if
we're
it
not,
didn't, then we're enemies forever.
bye.
Liz is like, call Nicholas, please, be fair. And she says, I'll call him soon. Then there's an awkward silence and there's tension that hadn't been there before, which feels so real. Kelly raised her eyes to Elizabeth's face. She was obviously upset and ashamed of herself, but she was also obviously being pulled both ways. With a pitiful shrug, she shook her head. Sorry. Did that remind you of anything? When Rob and Leah were at the fire pit and the guys had to stand up if they wanted to be considered to be stolen by the bombshells, and he had been getting to know Andrea, and he sat and everyone was like, good, Rob's doing the thing, he's staying with Leah, but he was like looking, and then at the last second he just like goes to Leah like, sorry, and gets up and goes to Andrea. We'll never forget this.
I'm sorry.
Now what's this $435 at Sport Zone?
Ned, why are you balancing your checkbook with your daughters? This is not for me.
Wait, are you balancing it with your daughters? He's balancing it with Alice.
Oh, was it with Alice?
It's stuff the
I
daughters
still hate
bought.
him.
Okay. Laura calls, and then Kelly refuses to talk to her, and it's awkward.
That is awkward.
Yes.
When Alice
Yes.
and Ned are talking through what's going on, and she thinks she's being fair to Kelly, letting her come to her own conclusions, was such a confusing way to think about that, because they're saying they're letting Kelly come to her own conclusions, like that's what Aunt Laura's plan is, but she can't come to correct conclusions without all the information. So it feels like what they're really doing is tricking her into idealizing her abusive father.
I mean, they're hiding information from her. And again, it's not that I'm not saying if this were the case, she shouldn't know, but it's not like this is only about his relationship with Laura. Like, it's not like, should we
Right.
tell her that he cheated on Laura or even he was abusive to Laura? It's that he was also abusive to her.
Right.
She was there. You know, he made an abusive environment to her.
It's one of those things that I think this is one of the central interesting parts about this text is like, at what age do we talk to children about certain things? At what age are children old enough to, and there's this tension here where they're saying, well, she's old enough to draw her own conclusions, but she's not old enough to actually know what's going on. And so it creates this unfair situation for Kelly where she's like old enough to do the right thing, but she doesn't have the right information or enough information to do the right thing. And I find that very rich and meaningful.
they're saying she's old enough to draw her own conclusions, but their
Yes.
actions are denying that she's old enough to draw her own conclusions. If they felt she could draw her conclusions, they'd give her the information.
It's almost like Aunt Laura's mouth is writing a check. Her pussy cannot cash.
There's a discussion between Kelly and Lila on having dads who hang out in Europe. And I did think it was really telling. So Kelly's going on and on about how great her dad is and everything, and how shitty her mom is. And Jessica thinks Kelly's complaints about her mother didn't impress her. All mothers acted that way. That was just the way they were, which is basically like she's concerned about her life and making sure she's safe. And her dad just like doesn't give a shit, lets her do anything, which whatever. But then Jessica gets up with Lila and she's like, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I'm just confused. My mom says Kelly's dad is a piece of shit and he's horrible, but Kelly talks about him like he's a totally different person. Lila bit her lower lip and shrugged. Not only that, Kelly can't stand her mother. Kelly won't even talk to her. Isn't that weird? They shuffle forward and Lila shakes her head. I don't know what to tell you, Jess. It doesn't make any sense to me either. So what are you wearing to the costume dance anyway? Lila continued without pausing to catch her breath. Jessica rolled her eyes. Trust Lila to ignore a problem that didn't concern her. This was gorgeous. Gorgeous, right? Jessica is saying that Lila is just not interested because it's about someone else. When clearly, right, Lila relates. Lila has an absent, shitty, human trafficking, potentially father.
Sure.
Who she creates fantasies about, the ways in which she cares about her, that is based on the gifts he brings her. And she obviously completely can recognize and empathize. You know, it's not the same situation, but with Kelly, who also obviously has this compulsive need to brag about her father, and it's and it's false. And she gets it. So she doesn't want to interrogate it out of solidarity. Gorgeous.
Or she just like isn't ready to go there.
Yeah.
At all. With her, I mean, yeah.
It would make her look in her own mirror a little bit.
And no one wants to look in the mirror.
It just felt so real because I feel like maybe at a similar time as I read this, I saw something in the news or saw something somewhere that it's a common thing for, I don't know if it's just like young girls, but to sort of like idealize their fathers and like be against their moms in younger ages. And then like as they get older, they tend to more realize how their dads have been shitty and like understand that their moms have actually been good or whatever. And that is like a common thing that happens. It sounds dumb how I'm saying it, but I don't know. I feel like that is real.
It's like kind of Electra complexy a little bit.
But like reverse. It's like we have to tell ourselves dads are good because so many dads are so bad. This book could be called Bad Dads. Okay.
Ooh. I like that a lot. I've seen that movie before.
We get another nightmare. She's worried about waking Jess up, and she thinks, how could she admit to her cousin that she suffered from this paralyzing nightmare as often as she did? Revealing, right? Because to admit means that there's a shame associated. But what is shameful about it? The fact that deep down she knows it actually contains some information. It's not shameful to say you have nightmares. So it's, I think, a signal. We see that Kelly at some point bought a book about dreams, and that book told her that dreams have to do with your subconscious. And then she's thinking, well, then why am I having these nightmares? And then she thinks to herself, don't even think about it. And it says something like, half of her wanted to know what it was, but the other half didn't. You know, so she's really in a sort of journey of engaging with this. Chapter 6, more of Kirk. His arrogance makes her feel secure. Letter from Dad, dear princess, and so on.
And she just starts crying and saying, oh, daddy, suddenly everything was perfect. It's like, wow, the bar is really on the floor.
So basically he's saying that he's going to come back from Europe to take her out for dinner on her birthday. That's the plan.
If all runs smoothly, as he even says.
And then finally she gets on the phone to talk to her mom, and it's awkward, and her mom's like, what if we come down there for your birthday and take you out to dinner? And she's like, no, I'm hanging with Dad. She's like, okay. It's really sad. And then Kelly's going to the disco with Kirk, and he's late, and she's making excuses for his lateness.
And his excuse is that he ran out of gas, and it's even at this point I'm like, oh, maybe he did, like, people do run out of gas, maybe he ran out of gas.
But again, on some level, she knows her stomach's tightening. but she forces
Yeah.
herself to sound unconcerned and says he's only half an
Mm.
hour late. I'm sure, something came up, whatever. And then when they're at the disco and they're on the deck dancing,
hmm
she felt as if she were dreaming. She let herself be swept away. And this sort of fantasy with Kirk feels like an old friend. And it says, and then as though she were hypnotized, she allowed him to lead her back to the dance floor. It's this thing that she like falls into.
Yep.
We learned that Kirk is apparently going out with Jew Marcy Kaplan. He says he's
She's just an
not.
old friend. She's just an old friend.
Kelly's having nagging doubt about Kirk, but thinks, well, if he said he's not dating this girl, Marcy, then I guess he's not, even though other people are telling her that he is dating this girl. And she learns that Kirk's reputation is quote unquote pretty daring. And then we get Liz and Enid in the locker room, and there's a shower and towels snapping. Don't even know what you made of that.
I mean, you know what I made of that. They're all singing Rubber Ducky from Sesame Street, if you know what I mean.
That's strange.
Strange and titillating.
Then we get the moment you talked about where Liz becomes self-aware, where she names the insight.
Oh, yeah. Swallowing hard, Elizabeth brought one hand up to her throat and fingered her gold chain. She realized that she could have been describing Kirk Anderson with exactly the same words that she used to describe Kelly's dad. Did that mean Kelly was falling to the same kind of dead-end relationship Aunt Laura had? Was Kelly attracted to the same kind of untrustworthy guy? Confused, she shook her head. It was too complex for her to understand. Which is kind of just a strange... I mean, it clearly isn't too complex. She clearly does understand it.
You know why I liked that, though? Elizabeth understands this idea that Kelly is falling into the same relationship patterns as her mom did with her father or whatever. Or like Kelly is being attracted to someone who's similar to her father, right? She understands that because it's a formula, it's an aphorism, it's a truism that you've heard. You've heard it on Phil Donahue, may he rest in peace, or Sally Jesse, or whatever daytime thing she's coming across to talk about such matters. You've heard it in your Cosmo magazines or I don't know what, but do you know what I'm saying? But it doesn't seem, but it seems so illogical. Like, why? Like, just because that's how your dad is, if it's shitty, why would you be attracted to something shitty? Like, it doesn't make intuitive sense. It feels wrong of like, why it doesn't, you know what I'm saying? The actual psychology of it actually is complex, and she doesn't understand that. So I actually feel so real to me that she understands it because it's a thing people say, but she doesn't get how that could be.
Also, I mean, more obviously, maybe this is interesting to you, but like, it's too complicated for her because it involves the relationship between a man and a woman. She's like, oh, could you imagine being attracted to a man? Well, that's far too complex for me. A simple lesbian here in the locker room singing Rubber Ducky, if you know what I mean. Squeak, squeak.
All right.
We get another nightmare.
And she tells herself sternly it was only a dream, it wasn't real.
One note I did have about that repeating patterns thing, I wrote, oh my God, the book even talks about how Kelly is repeating her mom's patterns of dating a bad guy. And then I said, this feels, as Pardo would say, ideological and kind of lets guys off the hook for being shitty. Like, it doesn't interrogate at all the fact that Kirk is shitty and Uncle Greg is shitty. It's like, it's Kelly's fault and Laura's fault for being attracted to these guys and perpetuating these patterns. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how I feel about it because I guess I sort of see both. Like, I don't see it in some way. I guess I see it, I'm not sure. Like, in some ways, I think it is putting the blame on them, but in other ways, I do think it's calling out the shittiness and like revealing pretty objectively the shittiness of their partners and like showing them some grace, especially at the end. Like, I do feel like they're kind of vindicated in that way. And I guess I feel like both can be true. Like, he can be shitty and that's his fault. And because of this family situation, she can be attracted to that. And that's also real and does happen. But I don't want her to be too blamed for it. So I agree with you, but I don't know.
I just meant in that one little tiny paragraph more than
Yeah, but that's also Liz's perspective. But of course, the text loves to valorize Liz's perspective.
Hello.
All right, chapter 9.
We get some birthday play.
It's Kelly's birthday. The Wakefields are doing a quote unquote pre-party for her where they're gonna like have snacks and hang out with the dad when he comes to pick her up, and then the dad will take her to dinner. But guess what?
What?
There's no knock happening at the door.
What do you mean? People love to show up at a door.
Not tonight. Not tonight.
Oh my God. What's happening?
And we're saying, where is he? And we're feeling uncomfortable. And guess what? He shows up and he has a disarming smile and a magnetism and a charm that no one can resist.
Can we just very quickly, there is the broken palindrome of at the beginning of the party, which is supposed to start at 5 o'clock, Jessica notices that Ned isn't home. She says, "Hey, Liz, it's 5 o'clock
Yeah.
and Dad isn't home yet." And then he basically immediately shows up. And so we get that kind of broken palindrome of like who's trustworthy, who's not trustworthy.
Yeah, fathers who show up the time they say they are, except for the one time it really mattered, which was when Liz was auditioning for going to Switzerland and that guy came to their house to test if they're a good family or not, and Ned was late for dinner, and that was annoying for Liz. Greg, Kelly's dad, strides confidently into the room full of excuses, of course, and gives Alice a hug she can't avoid.
Gross.
He gives a big story about why he didn't get her a present, which Liz clocks as like not making sense and being ringing false. And Kelly's like, that's great.
I did like that a lot. This idea that she's like, he says, "I wanted to get you this desk, but it would have taken forever for it to get shipped here." And then Liz in her head goes, "So you got her nothing instead?" And I was like, oh, good.
It's satisfying when Liz like sees that people are being sketchy. And then he flakes.
He immediately leaves.
He's like, I actually can't do dinner, sorry.
And Alice Wakefield says, "I'll never forgive him for this." And then she runs out of the room.
That to me felt like when someone wins an Oscar for a movie where it's like their performance wasn't that great, or their directing or their whatever they win it for wasn't that great, but like, it's like sort of an unofficial lifetime achievement award. It's like the Oscar they should have won for something else or for past performances or whatever. Sure. It's like when Alice says like, "I'll never forgive him for this," it's kind of like, is this what she's never forgiving him for?
No, yeah.
It's the unspoken incident that she's really bottled up and is now the birthday is the thing, And
Kelly's meanwhile negotiating with herself and saying, "Well, at least I saw him a little. It's something to see him after all this time."
In a familiar impulse that we've seen other kids do, she like projects the blame onto something else. So she's like angry at the traffic, and she's angry at whoever his business partner is that he has to meet with, and obviously her mom, and she is angry, of course, at everyone except him.
And Jessica says, "I would be so furious." And Kelly just keeps saying it's not his fault.
It's all Mom's fault.
And Jess is like, well, whoever's fault it is, it's still a complete disappointment for you. And I thought that was like a really helpful way to say, like, it's like, let's take fault out of the picture. And let's just say for a second, like, you seem to be feeling something. Let's name that feeling. And I thought that was beautiful. But then Liz pops up and goes, "Kelly, why don't you open your presents from us?" Like, Liz can't sit in that discomfort. So instead it's like, let's distract with presents. And it's like, let's not.
That is so profound, Robert. Thank you for pointing that out. That's actual therapy what Jess is doing, because what she's actually saying, right, is your disappointment is valid and can be held and recognized and named and addressed. And that doesn't have to mean that your dad's a shitty person or that you are betraying him or whatever. Sort of like when Enid was disappointed when Grandma was up to some stuff, it doesn't, it's not a betrayal to them. You don't have to pretend this is okay. Let's not all be doing our smiley face on the cover. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Jeffrey has an offensive costume at the costume party.
Yeah, he is a drunk, dirty wino. Very strange choice. Very offensive.
Perk is a sexy pirate, which of course calls to mind Luann de Lesseps, French pirate that she cheated with in St. Bart's, and then she spoke French on a hot mic and thought no one was going to translate the French, where she said, "We can't tell anyone I fucked this hot pirate," and this became a scandal for 2 seasons.
I love that she thinks no one else speaks French. That's like a very funny.
Oh, it was wild.
Tu peux faire une faveur pour moi, une grande faveur pour moi. Qui Tom, hier soir, tu sais, qui est un peu comme Johnny Depp. Il peut pas dire qu'il était là hier soir avec moi.
We show up, we're dressed like monkeys.
Perk is drinking beer and, they're getting snuggled up together, and she's saying she's just going to have Kool-Aid, and she feels like she's in a dream with him. And they stroll out to a parking lot. And guess what? He has a white Trans Am, also called the car of the guy who murdered Lori Hamilton.
Remember her name. Was it Lori Hamilton?
Something like that. I feel
Okay,
like.
we'll remember it. So they go to Miller's Point. He brings a blanket. He keeps pushing. She says, I want to take things slower. He just keeps grabbing at her. He
Accuses her of
calls
being
her
a tease.
the worst thing a person can be, a tease. And he is just like getting more heated. And she's like, take me home. And he grabs her. And so she kicks him. And he gets pissed and throws an empty bottle. And then there's something horribly familiar about the scene, the crashing, the darkness, the swearing and shouting, and the same unreasoning, overwhelming panic that always paralyzed her in her nightmare was back, stronger than ever. She had to get away. Crying, she began running back down the road, stumbling and tripping. There was something horrible she was trying to get away from, something more than just Kirk. It was the sound of breaking glass that haunted her dreams and thundering out of control anger. The scene swam dizzily into focus at last, and she remembered it all. She was 8 years old, hiding under the kitchen table, her hands over her ears, while her father raged with the fury of a hurricane at her mother. She heard dishes smashing to the floor. It was a methodical, piece by piece destruction of every plate and bowl and glass in the cupboards. This is poetry.
Yeah,
The
it really
way that
is.
the writers are playing with the pace, this is art. So Kelly recovers that memory famously. Now that she could remember what her nightmare was, she also came to a horrible realization. The dam in her mind had finally broken. That horrible nightmare scene had been real. And I need to tell you that yesterday, when I was reading this book, I was reading it after I had had my therapy session. And I had spent a lot of time with my therapist talking about relationships in my life and my desire not to really question or think about them because it felt like a dam would break and burst open. And then we read this text and it's like, holy fuck, Sweet Valley High, you got me again. I'm just a beautiful 16-year-old girl just going through it.
Did you cry? Do
Here?
you feel safe to at this point in the book?
Yeah. Of course. Did you
Wait.
not cry?
Which relationships are you not trying to open a dam on me? Anyone in the present company?
So my therapist has said that
No, you
it
guys
is
have already
safest
opened the
for
dam on me. What?
Yeah, our dam is wide open. No, it's not you.
Okay.
It's someone much more superficial and less important in my life than you.
The guy who you once told I could hear what's in your class, and he was like, "Fuck you forever."
Have we talked about that on the pod?
No. Okay, we gotta. We've 2
I know,
minutes.
but I also literally just talked about that in therapy. Like, are you bugging my therapy sessions? You're bugging
crazy.
what? You're bugging who? You're bugging me. And don't
That's
you
crazy because that was like what, a year ago,
over a year and a half at least.
and like I remember it like it was yesterday.
And we haven't talked about it in a year and a half. Okay, we've
No.
got to. I can't talk. I absolutely can't.
All right, so Tom McKay and Jean West pick up Kelly and bring her to the Wakefields, and she basically tells Liz everything. You know, I realized what's been happening in my nightmares, and there was this horrible thing, and my dad he threw all this shit. And Liz goes, "Are you sure you didn't just dream it?" And we say, Liz,
Are you sure you didn't just dream it? I mean, are you positive it really happened?
gaslighting.
I mean,
Gaslighting.
you don't throw that word around.
I've never said it. I've never heard
and
it.
now you have. Now we've said it.
We don't say that, but now we said it. Okay?
Then the Wakefields come home and they learn about this, and we learn that Alice didn't actually know this particular detail. So this particular detail in the fractal kind of situation of the secrets was actually, she didn't know. And Laura comes, they call Laura, they say, better come over from Tucson.
So they're processing through, and Jess goes, why did you keep it a secret? And Mr. Wakefield, may he rot in hell, says, I don't know, honey. Maybe she was ashamed. Maybe she felt guilty. There could be lots of reasons. People don't usually know why they do things, I'm afraid. But if it's true, it must have been very traumatic for your aunt. If it's true. If it's true. So I guess the gaslighting she runs in the family?
That's disgusting.
I can't. And I must, but I can't.
He's disgusting. I mean, that's where Liz gets it. We can't blame her because she gets it from him.
So then Alice decides she's going to call Aunt Laura. And the end of this chapter is that poor child deserves to know the truth. And I thought this was just like so rich because so much of this is talking about when can children know and what age is this book, she bangs, ooh baby. The way she moves, I go crazy.
Chapter 14, Laura shows up and she's like, I guess I owe you all an explanation. And they're like,
no, I guess I owe you an apology for being abused, I guess. I owe you an apology.
Well, and Mrs. Wakefield says no. And she says, okay, well, then let me give you an explanation. And Mr. Wakefield says, anything you feel comfortable telling us. And Liz is like, she looks so much like mom. And basically what she says, it was so bad the neighbors called the police. I didn't know if he'd be violent again. And then we left. And I was too afraid to ever come back. And Alice is like, why didn't you tell us? We were so worried about you. I know, Alice. At first I was in such a state of shock, I couldn't even believe it. And then it seemed so... She shook her head. There wouldn't have been any point in dragging it all out in the open. Dragging it all out in the open. Okay? This is... Really quickly, I got to quote linguistic anthropologist Sue Gall, who wrote this amazing semiotics of the public-private distinction. By using the public-private dichotomy, participants can subdivide, recalibrate, and thus make fractal recursions in their categorizations of cultural objects and personae. It's a discursive phenomenon that can categorize social facts. Like, dragging in the open, also her saying it seems so hyphen, it's like, I think what she was going to say is it seems so unbelievable, right? Because he's this so affable, charismatic guy that everyone like meets him and is so charmed and disarmed by. Like, why does she cut herself off, right? And then she's like, well, what's the point dragging it in the open? As if being honest about experiencing abuse is to drag as if that's wrong. Like, it should be kept. It's saying that this is a private matter.
Yeah.
It's saying it shouldn't be known. It's saying that it should be a secret. Like, that's so sad. And then she says this thing of like, well, I've known all these women that are bitter and they poison their kids against their ex-husbands, and I didn't want to be one of those women. And I'm like, this is men's rights language.
Yes.
Like, this is so
Toxic.
insidious trope, because this isn't real. What is real is that abusive men use children and use custody and use arguments that women are turning them against their kids in order to maintain control and continue abusive relationships. And this idea that like all these women are out there poisoning their kids against their dads, like, that's not real. Like, yes, that happens. Of course, parents are crazy. Men and women and all genders are nuts. But this is not how it goes. And it's really sad that this gets reinforced.
And the idea that the poisoning that we're talking about is telling the truth. And listeners, if you can hear me, the truth is not poison. The truth is an antidote.
I also thought it was so real that then when the twins encounter Kelly, there's like an awkwardness. And they're like, well, for goodness sake, let's stop acting like a bunch of strangers. And they start, now they're comfortable with each other again, whatever. But it's like, to me, that shows that like the putting of this knowledge in the open created a distance because there is still a stigma. There is still a stigma and a shame. Why does it make them feel like strangers just to know that she has experienced abuse and violence? Yeah. Right? Because it's shameful, they think. And then she's like, and then they are laughing about, oh, please tell us you don't still like Kirk, right? Like, that fantasy's been shattered too, right? She's like, yeah. And they're like, good. And she's like, well, I'm going to go back to Tucson with my mom. And that's it. And then it's the cliffhanger, which is random. Which is
the cliffhanger is
having a problem.
So strange. Jessica goes to Robin Wilson's house. Robin Wilson, former Fatty Never Forget, cheerleader, although they've forgotten, which is nice. And they saw her earlier in the text and we didn't highlight it, but she's just like staring out into space weirdly.
Yeah.
Robin's now looking completely dazed. Robin jumped slightly in her chair. Blinking rapidly, she licked her lips for some reason. Jessica, I think you should know. I may not be in the squad next year. What? Why? Well, see, I applied to college, Sarah Lawrence in New York, early admission. That's when you go a year ahead of time, right? Jessica prompted. No. Robin nodded. Yeah. And what? The girl's chin quivered uncontrollably, and I was accepted. With that, Robin burst into tears and ran out of the room, leaving Jessica stunned and speechless. Will Robin Wilson's aunt take control of Robin's life, forcing her to leave Sweet Valley and go to college in the East? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 46. No title given. That is one of the strangest sentences I've ever read in my life.
It's so random. Also, I'm obsessed with the fact that like we never get any actual brand names or like names of actual institutions. They go to like California University of Los Angeles and like they make up all these random things, but it's like they're obsessed with Sarah Lawrence. The fact that this whole thing is so specific to Sarah Lawrence is so funny. It actually is a really good book. It's called Decisions. But before it, we're getting the second super thriller, which is On the Run.
But we don't get a thing about it.
Yeah, I guess maybe they weren't sure which one was coming next or something. But that's On the Run, and we're gonna be back at the Sweet Valley News, and that's all I'm gonna say.
Terrified.
Something's thrilling happening.
I mean, something scary is happening for me.
Wow.
Okay. I mean, I just have to say, all of the books are great, and all the books are really important and meaningful. And I can't say that this is my favorite book, but I do think it is potentially the most valuable book we have read so far.
It's excellent. It's excellent.
It's exquisite. It should be mandatory reading in every therapist's office.
And if you are having family secrets
Mm.
and having a very, very hot dad who might actually be a jerk and not being able to sleep because of your nightmares, you probably have some time on your hands at night when you're just twiddling your thumbs and stressing out. So go ahead, open your podcast app, subscribe, rate, and review. Some of you haven't done it yet, and we know. Please go on there, write a nice review, and send it to a friend.
And I understand. It's hard to write a review because maybe all of your secrets will just tumble out. Maybe you don't even remember. Maybe you had a traumatic experience rating a podcast in the past, and so you can't even remember how to do it. But I say push through that. There's light on the other side.
That's right. If you are being kept awake at night by nightmares of writing podcasts, so funny.
Why is that funny?
Thanks for listening to Sweet Valley Hive, hosted by Robert Marks and Rebecca Pardo. For more, check out our Instagram at Sweet Valley Hive. Theme song by Yessie and artwork by Elliot Carroll.